wanted to mention, at least in passing, the fact that it is the 25th anniversary of a little show called Seinfeld. Strange anniversary, because a lot of people probably don't even remember how Seinfeld began, which is they aired the pilot as a one-off. Like, it aired in July, completely burnt off. The Seinfeld Chronicles. I remember watching it. I did watch it. And that could have been it. But then, NBC decided we're going to give it another shot. And they ordered 4 more episodes, aired a year later. And then I think it was finally the year after that it became, or maybe the fall after, that became a weekly series.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think Seinfeld is one of those things. I mean, it's not that you never see this happen anymore. It's not that you never see a network give a show time to find its audience, because they do.
They do.
They don't always.
Yeah,
but
it's hard.
They do.
Yeah.
Even Hannibal, we talk about this, like, they are giving it time to find an audience. It now needs to find one.
Yeah, yeah.
But they are giving it time. Yeah, but Seinfeld was one of those things that it's such a monster hit now, and has been. It's still huge and syndicated. Like, it's just still a big show, and it will remain a big show in television history. But when it started, it wasn't.
It wasn't at all, and it took quite a while. And then I was actually, because I was reading a little bit about last week and how it started to become increasingly popular, but it was really, I think it was the end of season 4, maybe, when it aired, the finale airing the same night as Cheers' final episode, which gave it this huge boost. And then it kind of kept that giant audience, and then it became like one of the most popular shows on TV.
Yeah, I mean, but it is an interesting case that way.
And it is also, I was very happy to see, because we ran a top 10 episode list that Max Nicholson wrote for us, and the comments were 95% just like, if they were arguing about anything, they're arguing about, you left off this great episode I love, but it was very like pro Seinfeld. It wasn't like, why are you covering this, or
who cares?
Who cares? Yeah. Which is, speaks to the show, especially I'd say these days, and with our audience, which is a reflection of our taste too, of it's very hard to get into, for many of us, and I know they're still insanely popular on their own, but traditional sitcoms, with an audience, hearing an audience laugh, or a laugh track, whatever it be, that format to some people, and I have to admit sometimes to me, feels very dated. But then you get a reminder of a show like Seinfeld, and even just reading Max's list, and I'm like, oh man, that's such a funny episode. Like, that was such a good episode.
Yeah, but Seinfeld, I think, didn't feel traditional then in the terms of feeling canned and boring, and it doesn't now. It felt like what it was doing, which was it hooked on to each episode a very simple but true idea that people don't talk about, but why don't we talk about close talkers and how weird they are?
Right.
You know what I mean? And once you do, you're like, it's so true. They're so weird. And I know that, and I think like it in its own way was hooking into things that people really relate to, like getting lost in a parking lot, whatever it is. It's very little human things that we just don't talk about or are not explored in such a funny way.
It was a great blend of that element of the like minutia of life that a lot of sitcoms hadn't delved into, or just TV shows, and then mixed with the idea that by the end, especially, that these characters could be like not great people.
Yeah.
And
they weren't going to learn a lesson.
Right, and they weren't going to learn a lesson, and it wasn't ever going to be about the like awe moment that a sitcom, even a good sitcom, will sometimes go for. Which obviously became hugely influential, because you have something like Always Sunny, which is taking that to as far as you can go.
Yeah.
Like, what if there's nothing redeemable about these people,
Well, and I think that in retrospect, that's the thing about Seinfeld. They're not great people, but they're not awful
people.
No,
they're not.
Either.
And I think that's why some people rejected the finale.
Yeah.
Because it was punishing them.
Yeah.
And some people didn't necessarily think they needed to be punished. It's like, oh, we've had fun laughing at some of the narcissistic things they've done and something, but I don't know if we feel they're bad people that need to go to jail.
Yeah. It's true, because if you take, it has been taken, and even something like Married with Children had like really like, they were kind of awful.
Yeah.
They were still amazing.
Right.
But the Seinfeld characters, I think, they were the kind of people that you're like, oh, that's Elaine, this is how she is, but she's not a worthless human being.
Right.
It's just kind of a human being, which is even more interesting in a way.
She fell asleep in Schindler's List. Who can blame her?
You know what I mean? And she didn't like to take her coat off.
Right.
Which I related to that so much. I am that person that doesn't like to take my coat off.
And she danced in the most amazing way.
She danced in the most amazing way. Yeah, I mean, I think Seinfeld is a great show, I think, in all of those ways and more, and highly influential. But it's funny because we've been watching a lot of pilots heading into TCAs, and I have not found a single half-hour comedy that I don't find repellent.
Wow.
And these, I don't know if maybe I'm being too harsh, but I really, really
haven't. I didn't love any of them, but there was a couple I thought were okay.
Which did you think were okay?
I did enjoy Selfie, I will say.
Which one was that?
The Karen Gillan one, which I didn't think I would.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet. So maybe I won't find that repellent.
Right.
I haven't watched that one yet.
What
else?
Others. I'd have to think about it.
I don't even think I have that screener. Let's talk about this later. But most of them, I mean, I watched one last night, and I won't call it out right here, but later I will, that I thought was so god-awful that I wanted to punch the screen.
Right. But the thing is, I will say that that's kind of how it always has been, in that you think about like how many bad shows, like even on NBC on Thursday nights, there was kind of this weird thing that happened by the mid to late 90s, where they had Seinfeld and they had Friends, two great shows with huge audiences, but the other two shows were this like weird revolving door of mediocre to bad shows, and that's where you had The Single Guy and Boston Common and Caroline in the City, and just this weird, like, all these shows that would just kind of exist, and they do pretty well because they were airing in between Seinfeld and Friends.
I know, and it's funny because it does get you thinking.
No one really loved those shows.
Yeah, it does, like, comedy. Look, I mean, comedy, I feel like I've sounded so harsh. I know it's hard. I don't think that I could make an amazing comedy half-hour pilot,
right.
You know? Like, I know it's hard, and I know that comedy in a lot of ways is even more challenging than drama in its own ways. And that there's been a lot of okay to not very good comedy pilots that turn out to be great shows. I don't remember the Seinfeld pilot, but that actually may be one of them, But yeah, I do. It does remind you of how tough that genre is to nail in a way that's very interesting,
and to make it as great as Seinfeld. Yeah, and as far as I recall, the Seinfeld pilot isn't great, and it is a show that took a couple years to really figure out. It was an okay sitcom that suddenly became a great sitcom when they really figured out this is what we're going to be doing, and this is how it's going to work. And it's also cool to see, although Jerry Seinfeld has not done a regular series since, although he has had a great career guest starring and playing himself on many other good shows. Larry David doing Curb Your Enthusiasm was sort of fascinating because, at the time Seinfeld was on, it's like it was pre, especially when it was first starting, it was like kind of pre-internet, and there wasn't as much attention being paid to like the showrunners and all that stuff. So it was like everyone was just paying attention to Jerry Seinfeld. But by the end, more people were more appreciative, especially after Larry David left and some people thought it wasn't as good. It was like, oh no, there was this other guy doing it with him and they worked so great together. So when Curb came on, and that was great, it was kind of cool to be like, oh yeah, you can feel that this guy did Seinfeld. Here he's doing it with single camera, but you can still feel that like sort of rhythm and like some of the humor coming from the same place.
Oh yeah,
That
absolutely.
was really cool.
I think that sense of the pointing out the obvious, probably comes from Larry David, because he on Curb will say the things that other people are thinking but do not say, but just because now they are offensive. Not because they're like, we don't really talk about that, but it's true now that you bring it up. It's more like, we don't talk about that because we don't talk about that, Larry. Like,
right. And keep it inside, dude.
Stop. Inside thoughts.
Although I would like another season of Curb, Larry.
I would too. I would love it. I love him.
Let's get more of that. But yeah, Seinfeld, I will say, reading reading our story, but reading other pieces this past week has made me be like, I want to rewatch Seinfeld,
Yeah, good. Make the time for that, Eric. Good.
See what I can do.